All right, let's get started. It is the second Tennis Parent Tuesday, and my name's Duey Evans, and tonight we're going to be talking about tournament scheduling and what's its purpose in the development of a junior tennis player and how should you go about it. A whole lot of to-dos and a few not to-dos. We'll see how you're doing it. So let's jump kind of right into it. So, talking about tournament strategy, development tools versus validation tools, and which one do you use it as? So, we're going to do a little recap of what last week was. Last week was all about talking about performance plans. How do you create a developmental performance plan for a junior tennis player? And we kind of had we had some homework, and the homework consisted of having some conversations with your coaches and asking about the developmental plans they have for your kids, and kind of curious how those went. Normally, when we do these check ins, anybody who is in the live, so if you're watching on YouTube, then we're not going to be dealing with the chat from YouTube. We're dealing with it on LinkedIn. I'm sorry, not on LinkedIn, on Zoom. So if you want a link to the Zoom meeting, just send me an email to dewey@theperformancearchitect.com and I'll get that to you. And you can engage with me in these conversations, which is what we'll be doing, kind of talking about what the week before was like and things like that. The mission of tonight is kind of learn how to implement those development plans with tournaments. How does it work in relationship to, well, I guess the key question, what did this tournament teach us about what practice should address? And that'll be the focus of the evening. I think I got lost here in what I was doing. Sorry about that. It takes a minute getting used to doing this all by myself again. Um, so, backwards problem. Most families are backwards. And so the common thing is we kind of work through practice. We might get out that big cart of balls. We work on things and then we go sign up for a tournament because there's one that somebody told us about, or we're deep into researching things on the internet and we know that there's a tournament, so we sign up for it. And this is assuming that we're practicing the right things and that it's going to actually apply to what we're doing. So we're missing some components in that. We should be using competition to drive training decisions, right? So it's a middle piece, kind of deciding what we're going to do rather than, I'm sorry, but it decides what we're going to do rather than it is the end all and be all of what's going on. How most coaching works. And yes, I believe it's wrong. There are some things that I think are good, better, best, could do, should do, might do, must do. I would say that if you're doing it through the closed, open, closed model, you're doing it wrong. Just plain and simple. So the closed model starts with the cart or the practice court, and we practice and we practice and we practice, and yeah, we practice some more. And then we open it up. So we go and play a tournament and we see how that forehand that we've been working on for the last 2 weeks works. And then when it doesn't work, what do? We close it back down to fix it. Because while it worked in practice, the added pressure of the tournament environment kept it from flowing the way that we wanted it to. The open, closed, open revolution. And while I say it's a revolution, there are a lot of people who are doing it this way, folks. If you're not doing it like this, you just have found a coach who's still operating as a relic, a fossil, the way it used to be. And I say that I used to be exactly like that, the closed, open, closed. As a matter of fact, I said that I could teach a chimpanzee to play tennis if somebody gave me a research grant. Um, but it didn't mean they could play tennis. I mean, I could teach them to hit a tennis ball. That's about the extent of it. The rest of it, actually playing the game, is what really matters, because tennis is a game, right? And so it has rules, and the object is to master the craft enough to be able to be better at it under the rules than somebody else. So the revolution, the open-closed model, open-closed-open model. So what do? Well, we started with the tournament competition. And that way we get some real information, some data as to what worked, what didn't work. And once we get that information, we can then sit down and we can develop a practice plan specifically for the things that weren't working real well. It creates some relevancy as opposed to the coach just saying, well, I think that your forehand doesn't look good. You can come and you can say, well, specifically under pressure, your forehand passing shot tended to float a little too high, giving your opponent time to get in and hit an offensive volley rather than learning to hit a dipper at their feet, make them volley up and maybe use a two-shot pass. And then once you've trained that, then you can go back and you can open it back up. So jump into some more tournaments and look specifically at how the things that you're doing are actually working, not looking for a new assessment or assessment on new things, but saying, okay, specifically, when my opponent comes in, and I'm not letting them come in, right? Maybe we figured out that actually the problem was my opponent's coming in too much because I'm leaving too many weak balls short in the court, which is giving my opponent a chance to attack. So maybe that's actually what we end up training. But whatever it is we've trained, we want to go back into opening up the environment and assessing what's working in the new with what we've trained. What tournaments do that practice can't? I'll let you read for a second. I think it's a lot of what I already talked about. Tournaments give us a real assessment of what's working under pressure, right? When we're working on something new, it generally has a 3-step progression as to how it works. First, it will work in a private lesson. The coach can control things in a way that allows the person to have a reasonable modicum of success or actually create enough failure. And the place to be actually is that little gray area right between where somebody can do it and where they can't do it. And so if we can leave them in that space, that would be the optimal learning zone. We'll probably talk about learning zones and some other thing. And so that's what we want. And then the second place it shows up is in practice matches. So we get out and we play practice matches, or we do competitive drills in a practice, and maybe it works there. And then we go out and we play tournaments and all of the things that are associated with tournaments. There are other people watching. The results are going to be on the internet. People are going to talk about if you had a good win or a bad loss. And at some point in time, I'll talk about the negatives associated with that also. Excuse me. Also creates training motivation, right? So we have the framework of what it is that's going on. We can figure out it worked, it didn't work, it didn't, man, I wish I had beat that kid before and I didn't, and now I want to go to work and I want to actually figure out how do I beat this kid. I've lost to them. Vitas Gerulaitis had something about Jimmy Connors when he finally beat him, that nobody beats Vitas Gerulaitis. I don't remember what it was, 14 times in a row or something. He had lost to Connors a lot of times previous to that. So creates a little bit of motivation. Also gives us a sense of what things work against different kinds of players. So maybe I have a game that works really well against somebody. I hit a lot of heavy balls, or maybe not even heavy. Maybe I hit a lot of loopy balls, and it pushes my opponent back to the fence, and they don't really know how to deal with that, and it works really well. And then I run into the kid that knows that it's really hard to take a moon ball on the rise, and so what you do is you move in and you take it out of the air, and then that person becomes the nemesis. Oh no, the person knows what to do. And so you recognize that, okay, that my game style doesn't match up well against this other kind of player. And so you get that little reality check. And it lets you look and you say, well, what things that I've been working on in practice actually hold up under the pressure of tournament competition. So you can look and you can say, that's really good. And maybe I don't need to work on that anymore. I need to work on something different and identify what that something different is. The other part of tournaments is there's just gigantic, enormous mental pressure associated with it. A lot of times kids that are very calm in practice absolutely lose their mind when they get into tournament competition. There is a lot of pressure associated with it. It's not always external pressure. So as a parent, you might be putting no pressure on your child and doing everything right, yet they put enormous pressure on themselves, and so they expect more of themselves, and they have a hard time accepting anything less than the best. So those things are things we have to watch out for in how we do this. The fatal mistake. More tournaments, more tournaments, more tournaments. Yep, everybody thinks more is better. More can actually be worse. If you overschedule, well, if you don't understand periodization and the phases of periodization, and therefore we overtrain, we can have players who get injured, we can have players who get burned out, we have players who will perform at less than their optimum. We get players that will not develop as fast. So if we don't play enough, well, that creates a whole nother set of issues. We don't get any information. We're just training in a vacuum. So it's like family lost on a desert island, but there's lots of tennis equipment and they play with each other all the time. And one of them ends up really good and the others end up pretty good. And then they finally get rescued after several years and they come back and they think that they're really good because somebody just beat everybody in the family. And then you realize when you get into a place where there are players who have been trained and competed a lot that you weren't that good after all. Also, if you underschedule, you can get information on training and train in ways that are less than optimal. You don't get good information, good feedback on the things that you should be working on. And so therefore you might be training the same thing. And particularly if you have a coach who is very technique focused, they might just, I don't quite like the way that looks, but it may be effective as all get out under the heat of competition. But you don't know that because you're not playing. So those are a couple of reasons. You also, competition and being a competitor and competing well, that's a skill that we learn too. And so we have to compete some, otherwise it's a hard one to do. It's one I'm not a huge believer that we have to compete a ton, but I think we have to compete enough, right? There are 3 levels of tournaments to think about. And I originally put this in the opposite order, but I'm going to go from the lowest tier to the highest. So tier three. Tier three are the tournaments that give you a chance to work on stuff. Maybe you are the number one seed, so you're working on playing with pressure. Maybe you are so far ahead of the other players that it gives you the opportunity to try something that you would never try against one of your toughest competitors. So you get out there and maybe you're working on your slice backhand and it's the first time you've ever tried to roll it out. So you're playing the entire tournament hitting nothing but slices. But you know that at a certain point, if you get down far enough, you can just go back and use your two-handed backhand or your one-hander if you have a one-y and pull the match out, which would then give you another opportunity to practice in a subsequent round. That's what happens when you play the tier 3 of tournaments. They're not something that you play a lot of. They're probably just kind of a research type thing. Trying to figure out, if I try this, how does it work? If I try something else, the way the USTA ranking system is, the lower tournaments probably wouldn't count towards your ranking, even if you won it. So you don't really have to worry about it, where we're dealing with a best of 6 tournaments. If you play enough, a lower level tournament wouldn't give you enough points that it would probably be one of your best 6 results, even if you won it. So kind of a no pressure event, yet still the pressure of it's going to be on the internet, friends are going to know how I did, all of those other things. So you just kind of treat it as a practice match with a little bit more pressure associated with it, right? Tier 2s. What are tier 2s? They're a good place to get in and take the stuff that you've been training a lot. So maybe it's not something that's brand new, like I was talking about the slice backhand, but more like what I was talking about initially with, hitting a forehand dipping passing shot as opposed to one that floats a little bit. So those types of things. So I've been in a training block and I've been working on it for a period of time, and it's worked in my lessons, it's worked in group stuff, it's worked in practice matches, and now I need to really get in and see how it's going to work against peers and maybe people I don't know. One thing that happens when all we do is practice is we practice against the same people and we know what they do. It becomes predictable, right? It's a dance where your partner, and it's pretty predictable. So you want to get in the arena against some people that you don't necessarily know as well and see how it works against them. I would say in this case, you want to maintain your normal training regimen leading into the tournament. So you don't need to make sure that you're well rested or anything like that. You just kind of keep going, and it's part of the regular week. And it might even be a place where you don't even take a day off after the tournament. So you just kind of roll into the tournament, compete, and then roll right back into the training environment immediately afterwards. And that's something that we could kind of talk about, what that training block looks like. Not today, but we can look at it on another day. And yeah, I would say that these are the bulk of the tournaments that you're going to play. So if you're somebody who plays 2 tournaments a month, so 24 tournaments a year, I would say that probably 16 or so of your tournaments are probably these tier 2s. Not the highest level competition that you're ever going to play, but a step down from that. Maybe it's a place that you get points that you accumulate or need to accumulate to get into the higher events, but ones where you're pretty sure that you're going to have that probably 2-to-1 win to loss ratio. And so it's a good place to confirm. So you go back into the tournament environment and you chart whatever it is that you've been working on. So maybe you've been working on recognizing and taking opportunities for the mid-court balls. And so you have a simple chart like maybe CDIEW, where the first 2 columns are could he and did he or she, and the last three are was it and was it effective and did you win. And so the first two are decision making columns and the last three are execution columns. And so maybe you failed in the decision making columns before, and so now that's really what you're checking. Are you making much better decisions? Or maybe you succeeded in making good decisions before and your execution was off. So you've come in to practice and said, okay, specifically, here's what I need to be doing with the ball. And you're going back out and you're recognizing, how does that work? Are you getting better grades in the execution column of things? Tier ones, here's the big boys. Here's the national surface championships. If you're in the US, these are oftentimes, if you're playing at the highest level, these are the L1s. If you're more of a sectional player, they actually might be L4s. So you spend a lot of your time playing mostly L5s, and every once in a while the L6s or something you drop down to as your tier 3s. But an L4 is something that you aspire to. Maybe you didn't have enough points for, but now you've done a little better in the L5s and you're getting in and you can play those. They're the highest level that you are. If you're a top national player, maybe these are the Junior Slams or the Orange Bowl, something like that. So the highest level of tournament that you're going to qualify into, those are the tier ones. And that's where it's almost like, all right, I've got to put everything together. Everything I know how to do, I need to bring out and execute as best I can. And in some cases, maybe it's your first time playing whatever that highest level is, and you're playing a 1 or 2 seed in the first round. You didn't get that lucky draw because you're not a seed. And so that's who you have to play. And you know that, well, it's going to take everything I have just to win points, probably. But what you get to see is, what do you do that you can actually win points? And what are the things that you do when you're playing the level down, the tier 2s, that, yeah, they just don't work at this level. So then you get the information back and you look and you say, okay, I need to not do that anymore. I need to leave it alone. You get that little reality check. It comes up and you're, okay, I need to do this different. This would be the place where I would be taking a break and jumping in and saying, what do you think? Let's have a talk. But I'm here all by myself today, and so unfortunately there are no questions, so we're not going to have the Q&A period. But I still wanted to come on. If you're watching this on YouTube, or if you're watching the replay, I guess we'll be on YouTube. So, this is the time when it's built in to sit and chat, but it's also a place that I get to come on and see. You get to see my smiling face and how all that works. But I don't have anybody asking questions, so I'm going to jump right back into it. Smart periodization for families. Adaptation. So, what do? Well, last week we talked about development plans. And so you have a development plan that should include all of the blocks of time. So training blocks and rest blocks and time that you're going to work on specific, like new things and make changes, active rest. All of those things are important parts of the periodization plan. And so, taking a look at that roadmap and figuring out where the tournaments fall in that. If you're looking back to what we were talking about just a moment ago about tier ones. So you're playing 2 to 4 tier 1s per year maximum. right? So where did they fall? Eh, you can only peak, if you go through this, you can only peak about 3 times a year. Some people say 4. I'm more a believer in 3. And so if you know you can only peak that many times a year, how do you place them in your schedule? Pretty easy if you're playing at the higher levels. If you're playing L1s, you know when they are. You have, the Easter Bowl clay courts, hard courts, and indoors, though some people don't play clay courts because it's awful close to have that turnaround from clay courts to hard courts. So some people will maybe only get into clay courts, but they're not quite have enough ranking to get into hard courts. So they pick one or the other, and some people play both. And then, the other ones are kind of spaced out, Easter Bowl in the spring and Winter Nationals. Or there's some other tournaments that you could play at that time of year too if you're a little bit higher, Orange Bowl, things like that. So figuring out where those tournaments fall in the schedule, and then making adjustments based on where you are. Maybe you have some wish list tournaments, and like, I really hope to get into these, but I'm not quite good enough yet. But wow, I just had this breakthrough period of time, and I got really good all of a sudden, and I've beaten a whole bunch of people, and now I'm getting into stuff that I didn't think I was going to get into. And so we've got to kind of look and have some flexibility in that. And then if we have tournaments, well, how do we modify our training schedule? I guess one thing I didn't talk about when I was talking about those tier ones, when you're getting ready to play a tier one, part of your periodization is you should probably taper off your training a little bit going into it. Be fresh. Don't have those weary legs. If you're playing a lot of higher end tournaments, kind of back to back to back, that at the end of it, you're likely not going to be playing as well if you succeeded, right? If you succeeded. So I'm getting to the semis, I'm getting to the finals, I'm winning them week after week. And so I'm playing a lot of matches. And so I'm putting a lot more wear and tear on my body. I don't have time to do the recovery kind of work, the wellness care that I might be able to do otherwise. And so I want to kind of take some time before those to make sure that I'm going in fresh so that my base level of fitness is as high as possible. And then we look and we make little micro adjustments all the time. We kind of look and say, should this be a heavy week? Should this be a lighter week? You hear about it when you hear about the pros and they didn't play at all. Hear about it a lot this time of year. If somebody didn't play after the U.S. Open, the summer season is pretty long. The U.S. summer is really warm, and so the players are just kind of beat down a little bit, and so they're kind of down resting, and now they're in Asia and getting ready for the end of year championships, and so they're ready for a last push after having rested a bit. They might not be as kind of competition ready, but their body probably feels a little better than it did, the second week in September when the U.S. Open was over. And then they get a little bit of downtime, though it often gets filled with exhibitions at the pro level, but to get ready for the season that happens in Australia, so the season down under. In the U.S., well, we're just not good at periodization, period. Let's be honest about it, that we spend way too much time thinking that because there's a tournament, we should be playing a tournament, right? And that's not the best reason. We've got to know, why are we doing this? What's the purpose for playing a tournament? Right? And we can kind of create that little checklist. And what are the things that we need to be doing? And what is it for? Is it a tier one where we're just kind of putting it all on the line, gearing up everything we got? Or is it a tier 3 that we're trying out something new, just experimenting a little bit? Generally, it's the tier 2s in the middle, which are somewhere in between. If I were to think about it like the scale And on one, so if we think about Lady Justice or whatever with the scale and the two sides, that we can go from one side being what I want to do results wise and the other one what I want to do performance wise. Well, if I'm playing at a tier one, I don't care as much about performance really. I care about results, right? I don't think I would have ever heard a player in the semifinals of the US Open saying, I won, but I'm really disappointed at how poorly I played. Yeah, no, not at all. Right? I won. That's it. Or I lost, period. But in the tournaments leading up to it, you'll hear them often talk about, yeah, I'm not playing as well yet, but I got a few more tournaments to kind of get in the swing, so they're still feeling things out. And then what do we hope to get out of it? Like, what's the outcome? What's the data that we're going to get, right? So we're in the age of data, and we're using all kinds of different things, swing vision and other such things, to get feedback on what we're doing. And what data are we expecting to get out of this? And then lessons versus group stuff versus spending time in the gym with the physio, maybe getting our body back right again. Well, what are we looking? Maybe we had a little tweak of a hamstring or something, and I want to see how it holds up. So I'm playing lower level, maybe a tier 3, probably a tier 2, just to see how's that holding up. It feels better, but I don't necessarily have the confidence on it, and I need to get out there and try it out under the competition and see how it holds up. And am I playing the right ones? Right. So is this right for my development? Have I scheduled in the right number of tier 1s, 2s, and 3s for things? I think that 1s are the tournaments that either you're going to get into, but they're at the top of your schedule, or they're aspirational, right? Whatever the 3s are can be more sprinkled in. They're everywhere in the tournament calendar, no matter what it is, that the level that you're playing at the top end. So maybe it is you play mostly national levels and ITFs. Well, you jump in and you're playing a sectional level 4, where a lot of the good sectional kids will be there, but it's a low level event for you. For you, that's your tier 3. And so what are these tournaments that you're playing? And you can just kind of pop them in where you need, right? And then I guess the last one on this slide is, are you fresh enough to be getting out of it what you hope to get out of it? Red flags in tournament selection. I'm going to actually read each one of these along with you. Availability-based decisions. Playing tournaments simply because they're available or convenient without considering their role in development strategy. Yeah, right. Tournaments are everywhere. They're there so that somebody who actually does the planning and creates the tournament schedule will have an event at the appropriate level that they can plug into their schedule. It's not there just for you to go play because it's there. There are always tournaments. That's a piss poor reason to jump in to play a tournament. Points only focus. Woo! Yeah. Good thing you can't see my face right now, because there are points chasers everywhere. In some cases, you have to chase points. I know a young man whose goal it is to play in Junior US Open last year, and he's just starting to play ITF events. And so he's needing to go someplace to get points that will get him into higher ITF events, ultimately into the US or the Junior US Open. And so you have to do that a little bit to get to where it is you're trying to go, but recognize that that's really all that you're doing at that event. And it's probably not good to play a lot of them, right? If you've got to go someplace where the competition is less in order to get points, that kind of says that you're not ready to play at that level where the competition is stronger, right? So if I go to Guam to play a J300, I'm probably not ready to play a J200. That just, yeah, it doesn't make sense. all I am is getting points. And God bless you. If your family can afford to do that, then that's great. More is better mentality. So that you're just playing because you want to play a lot. You want to have more tournaments on your player record than anybody else. Well, that's great. Maybe I'm a kid that just jumped into the sport at 13 years old, or maybe I'm a kid whose parents didn't really think that I was in the kind of mental state that I should be competing at 9, 10 years old, and now I'm jumping in and I've got to learn how to be competitive. Yeah, okay, jump in and play. You know what you're doing. You're getting something out of it. You're getting the experience of playing competitive events at the highest level that you can compete. So, but that's not just because more is better. That is, I need a certain amount of training at this, and this is competing, yeah, with the pressure of it being a tournament. Figure out what things worked, what didn't, what do we need to do? Because I think that a lot of the most teachable moments happen at tournaments. They don't happen. They can't be created anywhere else. They come with you back to the practice court. It's one of the reasons I think coaches watching players compete is really important, because it's really easy to relay it back to, remember when you were playing Janie in the semifinals and it was 4-all, 30-all, and you decided that you were going for the big serve up the tee, and you hadn't hit it the whole time, and you won the point. Wow, that was amazing. You made a tactical thing of, you would set up a diversion, or you went for the same thing you'd been missing the whole time. And so why didn't you move things into bigger targets, so quality balls to bigger targets, or whatever the lessons that come out of playing a tournament are. If you're ignoring that and you're just like, yeah, I won, I got a trophy, that's great. Not validation seeking, using tournaments primarily for external validation and confidence building. Whew, I guess I just said that. So you're getting trophies, filling up that trophy case. Well, I will tell you the secret of, you might want more trophies, but very few of them, when you go back and look in the attic 15 years from now, when your kid is moving into their own house and you're thinking, I need to get all of their stuff out of here, and you start handing it to them, they will not know about most of those tournaments. They're not looking back and saying, I beat Jim Bob in the finals of that one. I was down 0-3 in the second set. Like, those things are going away. Those memories are going away. They might want to take the little plaques off the bottom of them and keep them plastered to some board or something, but they're not going to want all those plastic trophies and medals and ribbons and all that stuff. They just don't matter. They really don't. So if that's what you're doing it for, you're not doing it for the right reasons. Real case study. I got to dig deep when I come up with this stuff. But 14-year-old player consistently lost first set tiebreaks at regional tournaments. So couldn't handle the pressure of it. They were good, but then under pressure, they were making bad decisions, right? And so tournament assessment. Competition data showed strong baseline game, but mental, tactical breaks down in crucial elements. Practice performance didn't predict competitive struggles. Yeah, so they were rocking it in practice. They were executing in lessons. They were killing it in practice matches, everything. But then they got into those tournament pressure situations, and everybody's looking, and they became the deer in headlights, and they absolutely froze. That is why things like Wardlaw directionals were developed, to give people places to go when those moments happen. I'm going to save my opinion of Wardlaw directionals for some other time, but I think it's good to know them. They're tools. Everything is a tool. Training focus shifted to pressure point situations, tactical decision-making drills, and mental skills development rather than more technical work, right? So creating those game-based situational practices, giving them the mental skills, maybe their mental scripts as to how they're going through those situations, and so that when they go back out there, they have that positive script that they're going to run, that they're not like, oh, I'm going to choke again, or what. Okay, they switch to, here's what I do in this situation. I've written out my script for this critical situation, and I've practiced it, and now I'm in that place, and I know what's going to happen, right? Most of you probably heard of Tiger Woods. Tiger Woods' dad, Earl, trained Tiger to expect to be in a bunker or behind a tree. And when it happened, he was no longer surprised. He was like, okay. And that gave him the mental fortitude to not freak out at that moment. He just, okay, what's the solution? What do I need to do? Do I need to chip out onto the fairway? Do I need to get up and over? Well, whatever it happens to be. I'm not a golfer, so I can't give you all those ins and outs, but he had certainly had it figured out well. So then the competitive validation. So we talked about the open, which was the initial situation. Here's what's going on. And then they closed it down, trained it, and now open it back up. Competitive validation, return to tournaments, showed improved clutch performance and tie-break record. Player understood why the training was necessary after experiencing the competitive consequences, right? So they went in and they were training it, and they knew, why am I doing the same thing day after day after day? Well, because you lost a critical match. First set tiebreaker, ended up having to dig out from a hole. I'd rather play from in front than behind. And so here's why you're doing it. There's a real world thing. And so the lesson, tournament assessment, revealed a development need that never would have been identified through practice, right? Kid performed in practice, but they didn't perform in tournaments, and it led to targeted and effective training. Much like new technologies are able to more effectively treat cancer. So you know what it is. It's not a general thing, it's a specific thing, and we're going to jump in and we're going to pinpoint treat exactly what we see and come up with the most effective answer to the whole deal. Role of parents. Well, that's why we're here, right? You're watching, and I'm guessing it's not kids watching this. So you're a parent, and what is your job? And your job's to ask questions. Always ask questions. And, some coaches will say, don't ask questions, just write checks, drop kids off, do that. No, you are the captain. And so if we were to talk about little Jimmy or little Janie, that you are the captain of Team Jimmy or Team Janie, and they are the player, and while it's all about them, they're not old enough to make the decisions. The coach is the expert enrolled, and so when you hire an expert, you should listen to them a bunch. I'm not saying don't listen to them, but you are still the person, you're the CEO, you're the captain, you're ultimately making the decisions with the input of marketing, finance, all of those people, but you as the CEO, you're making the decision. But you also have to ask questions, right? You don't go into the boardroom as the CEO and then just sit there and don't ask. You want to know what they're saying, and from advertising or marketing or finance, that's an important thing to you. And so always be asking, what did the tournament teach us? And what are training priorities as a result of that? What are we going to be doing for the next week? And I think it's important to ask the coach, and to look and to say, You know that document we created, that player development plan? Well, it needs to be a living, breathing document. And so let's pull it out and figure out how are we going to adjust it? What tweaks do we need to make with this? And making sure that we're learning. I think the greatest learning, I've already said it, the teachable moments, but I would also say that means the greatest learning moments come in competition. So are we making sure that we're maximizing the value that comes from that rather than we just played another tournament and I have more wins and more losses. And we spent a lot of money eating in restaurants. But there was a really good restaurant in whatever that city was. Not my idea of player development. And so coaches should be asking for that information. If a coach can't be there, and they often can't, particularly if they're coaching multiple players, even if they want to be there, they can only watch one person at a time. And so what if players are playing at different sites and at different sites or at the same site at the same time, but coach can only watch one. So coaches need that information. So as a parent, gather that data and bring it back to the coaches. Now we're at that place where there's nobody. So the question and answers about tournament dilemmas, maybe if you come by and you see this video and you stayed at this point, please poke these in the comments and I will make sure to read them and to comment on them as best I can. Takeaways. Use tournaments to drive training decisions. Yeah, like that's the whole goal of what do I need to work on? Did what I work on actually get better? So therefore I don't need to work on it anymore. Or maybe I need to work on it a little bit more. So drive your training decisions from the results from tournament. Tiered tournament functions. Different tournament tiers have different roles in your tournament schedule. So are you looking for them for major assessment, a tier 1? So if I use everything I have at its highest power, how does that work against the best competition I face? Progress checks, the majority of it. So it might be just checking on last week. So I got a tournament this weekend. I'm just checking to see how last week's stuff worked. I was really honed in on a specific thing and need to come back and open it up and check to see how well we trained it. Do we need to go back and train it some more or not? And then that lowest level, the tier 3s, what can I go out and I can try? And maybe, I hadn't thought of it when I put this slide deck together, maybe a tier 3 is I just need to have some fun again. I haven't been having fun. I've been training real hard and I'm going out there and I'm using some trick shots. But don't want to do that a lot because you don't want to make fun of your competition where, I can hit balls between my legs and behind my back and do those things. But, you go out and you do some things. Maybe you hit, an air Sampras or something, and some things or a jump backhand. Just some things that are fun, to get out and to give it a try. Responsive periodization. Smart periodization adapts training focus based on competitive results. Yep. That's as opposed to the opposite, which is following rigid, predetermined schedules. Make sure that you keep an eye on the tournament calendar and you figure out, how do I add things? How do I subtract things? How do I move things around? Maybe I did a lot better in tournaments than what I had anticipated doing, so therefore, and maybe I don't need to play these couple of tournaments coming up and need to spend more time getting some active rest or rehabbing body or just training something. I played enough and I got into enough big pressure situations that I've really identified where I need to step it up a little bit. Strategic decision making. Ask the right questions. Questions. Socrates is my man. Like, how do you use questions to lead you from your hypothesis, what you think, and drill it down, maybe possibly change what you think based on the questions that you ask, but use questions to inform what you think. Really important. So the challenge for the week, before the next tournament, and I probably should change these slides before your next tournament. One of my pet peeves is adults that talk about they're playing a tournament when it's a kid's playing a tournament. I know that you're going along and you're playing a critical role, and it is a team. You are team Janie or Johnny, but they're the ones actually getting out and competing. So maybe I have to think about that one a little bit. So before your next tournament, apply the tournament decision checklist, right? Know why you're playing and what's the reason. The why and the what, right? How much stuff have you read, listened to, watched, and somebody's talking about know your why, know your why, know your why. It's a refrain that gets repeated often, and it's critical. There's a reason so many people repeat it. Know why you're doing something. Don't just do just to do. You could be doing the wrong thing and doing a lot of it, and it could be leading you rapidly down a path you don't want to be on. Right? After your next tournament, more questions. What did you get out of the tournament? How does it change what you need to be doing next? Not we're just living in a rigid, the document says supposed to be doing this week, and so here's what we're going to do. Be flexible. Be flexible a little bit, but don't be changing so much that you're always changing and you don't know where you're going anymore. You're just going off. Chasing rabbits and squirrels. One of my favorite things to do. Chasing rabbits and squirrels. So have a good discussion with your coach. Really important. Have that open dialogue. If your coach is someone that doesn't want to have conversations with you, I will say it right here, right now. Don't have that coach around anymore. It just is how it is. Right? Have a coach that's going to communicate. Have a coach that's willing to be questioned. Not that you're questioning whether they know what they're doing, but you're asking questions to inform you. Maybe you're asking questions because answering the questions helps inform the coach themselves. It's something that you can do to help your kid and to help you. I know that it's hard, right? I've been a coach to players at a really high level. I've also had 3 kids of my own and had some of them in tennis. Well, they were all in tennis at one point in time, but they've all been involved in different things at very high levels. And I recognize having your kid be involved in something where you have to sit on the sideline and watch them struggle and you feel powerless is absolutely the hardest thing in the world. Take back some power. Ask questions. Help inform the process. But don't be that busybody where the coach thinks that you want to be the coach. No, you're just the CEO. The coach has a role. Let them play the role. And I will catch you next week. I think. Oh. Yep. Next week we'll be talking about the mental game development. Oh my goodness. Here comes the hard one. Not so hard for me because at one point in time in my life I felt like every challenged child was sent to me to work. I spent more time with child psychologists and other people learning mental training things. And I think I understand it. We'll see so much, but I hope that you come along with some questions and maybe we can talk through it together, because that's the form that I like best, is when it's not just me, but me along with other people, and it's a dialogue back and forth and we hash out some things. Yeah. So until next week, have a wonderful week. and ask lots of good questions.